Hello and welcome to Area Control Bros. This is episode 18, which, as everyone knows, is the traditional episode in which you discuss evolution as it pertains to area control.
Mm,
Mm.
yes. And what better game to do it with than Dominant Species?
Indeed, indeed. Dominant Species, this is a game that we played many times, and we played Marine not as much as the original, but we played it a few times. And I consider it to be a very important game in the genre, and important being like a carefully chosen adjective because I think this is like a design that is so unique that it needs to be addressed at some point if you're talking about area control games. And we'll dive right into it. Dominant species is rank overall exactly 100, so it's barely hanging on.
Oh, wow.
Barely hanging
Really?
on. Soon to be pushed out by arcs, I'm sure. 7.8 2 to 6 players. One of the interesting things about this game is the fact that it can play with a variety of player counts. Weight 4.04. And I think I'm just going to touch on that a little bit. To me, this game is kind of like the iconic heavy game because this game is like, I don't think that the rules of this game are excessively complicated. And in fact, I think the rules of this game are quite elegant and the way that it programs itself is efficient. However, regardless of what's going on with the rules, you have to think a lot in this game. This is a game that you're going to be spending all of your calories, all your brain calories on examining even just what the board state is, really.
Yeah. There's always it's most of the time it's just making a an okay decision, you know. Uh there's a lot of times where it's like you've got a bunch of options that are like, well, I guess I'll just hurt everyone as much as I can. I think is usually what dominant species boils down to. Is like, you know, it seems like that guy's doing pretty good, so I'm gonna hurt him. And if I can't hurt the guy who's in front, I'll just hurt whoever's near, you know?
Yeah, there's some
Yeah, I
truth there.
mean,
And there's a million ways to do it in Dominant Species, which is one thing that I really, really love about it is the level of player interaction is just through the roof. And oftentimes that player interaction is extremely meaningful. Be it through the domination cards, be it through the glaciate action, what have you, right? Even the game will kind of naturally progress towards, making you be in some uncomfortable spots, but especially other players will put you in uncomfortable spots.
Yeah. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but like one of the biggest things that can happen in Twilight Imperium is the like Muat hero ability where you nuke a tile. And Dominant Species kind of does that with Glaciate like every round.
yeah, it's just another Tuesday in dominant species for like a supernova to go off. It's like, up, happened again.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, that tile that was really amazing that you were on. Yep, it's an ice sheet now.
Yeah, and not only is it an ice sheet, but also some of the time we're gonna eliminate your like only food source there. And so, good freaking luck.
Yeah. I love how the glaciate does that where it's a very big it's like a bomb that's just like always gonna go off like every round, include like among the other bombs which are the cards. Um and then it also but I also like the it unlocks the other like there's not a win con, it is like a point, it is like a bit of a point salad. Like it's not point salad, it's like you're all pushing like to be in front. You know, you're just pushing to get as much VP as possible, and whoever's farthest along at the end wins. But
Yeah,
the glacier stuff's really interesting.
the survival points
Yeah.
are significant, and early on it is not significant. But as these tundra tiles, which gradually, by necessity, are placed adjacent to one another, increase, the amount of bonus VP you get from getting that survival card is huge. Like getting it on the last turn of the game can just win.
Yeah, if no
Um,
one contests you on survival, you can just kind of win that way. But oftentimes there does end up being like at least two people who are like trying to go for it and then end up kind of screwing each other out of it.
Yeah, true.
There's almost always a fight over it. I can't ever I don't think I've ever seen a game where there wasn't a fight over survival in the later rounds of the game. Um,
So, certainly not a game where people understand how in-game scoring works, which,
yes,
speaking
okay.
of this game being on the heavier side, I do agree that it's quite elegant in its design, but I can recall my first time playing this and getting to in-game scoring and going, wait a minute, what the hell are you talking about? Now, to be fair, it wasn't Will teaching it.
Yeah, it was all
It,
of our first play and someone
yeah,
else's third play or something.
right. But they did not do the best job of explaining like what exactly the end game scoring was. And because you're getting all these points throughout the game, it almost felt like, oh, well, the last round of scoring will be the same as every other round of scoring. It's like, no, 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 there's a lot more to it. Um, Kind of lock in your final area control points, so to say. But it can make a big difference, I guess is what I'm getting at. And it's uh knowing those things and understanding them at a deep level is really going to influence your strategy in the later turns.
And I really like the end game scoring for this game because I think it's knowing how it works that really influences your decisions later on in the game. And it's kind of like picking your lane and finding a way to protect it. And you in this game is all about protecting or attempting to protect how you're trying to win because you can't because shit's gonna hit the fan no matter what in this game. Like there's just no strategy that cannot be utterly obliterated.
Right.
But and so there is that element of like not trying to be too obvious about what you're doing or trying to set up the board in such a way via exploration that makes your strategy more durable or your control of certain places easier to maintain because maybe only one element connects that tile to other tiles, and that's the element that you kind of have dominance over. And so there's a lot of nuance to this game. And like I said earlier, this is such an iconic design for me. Like there's really nothing else like this game. It doesn't feel derivative of anything, and I don't think anything feels like derivative of it.
Hmm.
Like we haven't seen like it's not like the slew of, deck builders on the market or something. We haven't seen like dominant species likes entering the mainstream or anything. And that makes sense because it is a heavier game. But nonetheless, I think that, I think this game is one of those ones where I can't imagine it ever leaving my collection because it occupies such an interesting and unique brain space and mixes so many mechanics. And I think the central mechanic, besides area control, is this part of why I like it is because it has a very similar sort of start of the turn as Forbidden Stars does, and where you're each placing one worker essentially, action pawn, I think they're officially called, down on the various actions in the game, and it's a scramble because you want to do everything but you can't, and you have to decide what you're prioritizing. And maybe prioritizing one thing means you're just not going to have the opportunity to do even your second thing that you wanted to do. And so you
Right.
have to constantly pivot and adjust, and everyone's interacting and hate drafting with each other constantly in this game, even during
Yeah.
that phase.
I think the only thing that might be derivative of it is dominant species marine,
Well,
which
okay.
is, you know, we
Fair
can
by
say
the same designer.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
okay, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay, that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't see very many other games that lean heavily into that action pawn queuing. I agree with you that Forbidden Stars feels similar and that we sort of have this setup phase and then we're going to go through and reveal all of it. But you still have this significant difference in the feel of Forbidden Stars in that when you go through and start doing all of those reveals, if there's going to be a battle, that thing slows right down.
That's true.
Whereas with dominant species, sure, you might have a little bit of like, okay, well, where am I going to glaciate or what domination card am I going to use? But generally, you're going to have a pretty good idea as you're getting to those action pawns. And the only reason why, you might not have a perfect idea of it is that everybody else is doing their action pawns along the way and the board state is changing. But I think an experienced player will have a pretty good idea by the time it gets to their action pawn of what they're going to execute on. You look at Forbidden Stars, yeah, I mean, the game can slow right down. And whereas with dominant species, I feel that that phase of resolving all the action pawns is generally quite snappy, especially when it comes to some of the earlier slots on that board where it's like, oh, I'm gonna pick up this resource and put it on the map, or pick up this food type and now I'm specialized and can survive off of that food type or what have you. Those are generally quite quick actions.
I think the only time it might slow down is when you're like one of the first people to be dominating. If there's like a bunch of stuff in there that is gonna screw you over. Like if you're, if you're trying to pick your poison, or like if there's a couple things that are really good, um, you like that can introduce some AP, but
Yes.
but the AP does diminish after like the first couple people get the good, like the best cards, and then
And it's
everybody's left
nothing
with the
compared
rest.
to like a
You
big
know?
old space battle, I
Yeah,
guess is
yeah,
kind of what
yeah.
I'm
I
getting
Yeah.
at.
absolutely. Well, also this is an open information game, and as you said, like the board state can change as these actions that you've set up beforehand are executed. But you're going into the once the pawns are all placed, you at least have some idea of like what's going on. And as you said, certainly the higher up actions, like adaptation, you typically went there to do one specific thing, so you're already ready to just do that right away. And
Right.
I think it's the move actions and as Ben said, the domination actions, which can take longer. And there's another interesting part of this game that I think is um, another thing that I think it's been in other games as well, but I feel like it's very pronounced in this one, which is that you can go further to the right on those action tracks to go later, like after the people that are performing the same action deliberately, but with fewer instances of it, like with the ability to move after the person who's moving before you, but you move fewer times. You move fewer cubes, I
Right.
guess technically. And so it's like you're trading off you're trading off information for kind of how powerful that action will be. And I think that's
Right.
also really interesting.
I think so too. I feel like usually you're probably only really leaning into that with migration.
Mhm.
Um, but there's a similar thing with like, that cost benefit of putting a pawn down on the second glaciation space and not being able to, you kind of only get one action out of that pawn over the course of two turns in that case. Like that can be quite interesting. Or maybe you look at the Wanderlust tiles available and there's two ocean tiles, and so you decide to take the second one. There can be some situations like that. But yeah, me personally, I think that the Migration 6 usually is the strongest one if you believe that someone is going to take seven. Um, yeah, that's a good point.
I do
Yeah.
think sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I like the theme of the game.
Oh yeah.
We haven't talked a little bit about too much of the theme of the game, but I just like that you get to play the lizards or the mammals or the bugs. I always have a fun time with that. They've got some asymmetry, which is pretty minor, but I don't know. There's just something fun about that. I like it.
The asymmetry is minimal, but it's enough to sort of get you into it. Like I think for this kind of game, I think the amount of asymmetry here is just right because I think later on the asymmetry will develop anyway through like what adaptations you've acquired and that kind of thing. I
Yeah, but
think
it can be quite interesting. Like I feel like the more I've played this game, the more nuance I find with that asymmetry because it is quite
mm,
minor. But for example, even the starting tiles can be quite a big difference. The mammals have lower scoring starting tiles that they're on than the insects, for example. And so then you go, well, how do I work this out? Like why is that? Why would the mammals be that way? And really, I think it's because mammals excel in the tundra, where they're able to survive, keep one guy alive without a food source. And that doesn't sound like a big benefit, but in the late game, that can be the difference between winning the survival or not. And that might be 30 points, you
Yeah.
know?
The other thing we haven't talked about the asymmetry is the mammals break all ties. There is like the
Yes.
food chain order
that's true.
where like and you do have last placement, which is the drawback. But but you can mitigate that. I always like playing the bugs because the bugs get to put their stuff down first, and you just get to add more bugs. So
Yeah. But no, the tie break, to be fair, yeah, probably more important than the actual mammal ability of like, surviving without the
Well, but
food
I
source.
well,
But
but
the
I
tie
think
break is really important.
But I think you're right because like I think the tie break is also most important on the tundra where they're going to be like these one or two on each. So it's easy
Right.
to tie and then win the tie for mammals on the tundra. Like that's the strategy. I think more than any other like species, like that's if you're playing mammals, I think that's just the strategy you kind of have to lean into. I don't think they're as versatile. They're very good at that strategy, like they're the best at it, but I don't think there's not really a backup plan for them
Right.
as much. Yeah.
Whereas, like, okay, the arachnids getting a free kill, oftentimes they can compete on the tundra just because they have one free kill.
Yep.
Are they going to be as good at it as the mammals? Maybe not, but they're more flexible, you know?
Hmm.
Like there's some interesting things with them, I guess is what I'm getting at. There's some really cool plays you can make as the reptiles with the regression step. Um, Sometimes you might take an unexpected adaptation to force a regression with the reptiles, and everybody else isn't even thinking about it. Um, Lots of cool nuance, I guess, is what I'm getting at in terms of the actual differentiation between the different classes. But
yeah. The best part about the arachnid's ability is that the threat of the free kill is often more impactful than the actual kill itself.
right, it
People
causes
mess
a
with
lot
you
of
less
conversation,
often,
the arachnid free kill.
It's it's the most powerful. It's kind of like the equivalent of like showing somebody in a card game that you have like a counter spell or like a
Hmm.
removal, but not actually casting it and being like, I have this, so don't do that.
Right.
And then they're like, "Oh, okay, I won't do it." And it's like it's almost like you cast it, like you did the thing, but like now you stop them from doing it.
Yeah.
That's the spider effect, which is just like, "Oh, well like I can't do that because like he might use that thing." But like really when you're playing the spiders, it's like you only have one killed in use, so like if everybody just made their plays, you could only stop one of the like five of them or something, you know? But
Right.
maybe just the threat of it stops all five of them and like you just get the benefit.
Yeah. It's like, oh,
Everyone's
well, if
scared
it
of the
stops four
spiders,
of them and not the fifth one, then the kill will stop the fifth one, that sort of deal.
Yeah, it's really
I
funny.
can't tell you how many times I've had to use an additional action pawn to like migrate a second time in order to like have two dudes moving into every spot where the arachnids are because I'm so scared of that one kill, especially in terms of trying to, beat them out on survival. Um, I think Will, you've played arachnids a ton, and I
They're
feel
my
like we're
signature
often
faction.
competing on the
It
survival, and
it
it's
does
it's
come
just a
down
fun
to
little
it.
fun little deal.
Yeah, I do like the arachnids a lot. I think they're my favorite um species in this game. But again, this is the sort of game I'm just happy to play like anything. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
I like them, but I think that like the core of this game is really good. And I guess that's the point that I was sort of driving towards before, which is that like the asymmetry is going to color your experience of the game, but like the core gameplay of this game is complicated and interesting and strategic, and there's plenty to sink your teeth into. And I think if it were like TI levels of asymmetry, it would almost be like, it'd be like
yeah,
my
yeah,
it'd be
brain would
like
explode.
yeah, I think it would be too much. So I think the fact that when I said like it's the right amount of asymmetry, I think it's like just enough to like not make it like when you start a new faction in this game, you have to like restart your whole learning of the game.
yes,
And but I think that but yeah, anyway, this is before we even go into before this is a little preemptive because we're not going to be going into scoring for a while, but this is one of my favorite games, honestly. Like I just thinking, even just thinking about it, but despite that, and I bring this up because I'm just about to bring a con, which is I think that you have to play this game with the right group.
mm,
That kind of goes without saying with a heavier game, especially. I think that's like it's one of those things where like the heavier the game, the more important it is that you have people who like know and understand they're here to play a heavy game. And we had a recent experience with someone who was not ready to play this game, and I didn't blame the game. I was just like, well, I probably shouldn't have broken this out and like sprung this on somebody who like didn't kind of wasn't ready to play this weight of game. And it's easy to forget when you play this game enough times that it can be overwhelming. And more than just overwhelming, I think it's like overwhelming in like the mentally taxing sense, but also overwhelming in the like you're just constantly assailed at all
Yes.
times by everyone. Like there's no safe space in this game, and I mean that like literally. Like you're constantly in danger of losing everything. And
Yeah. And the thing
yeah,
is, when you haven't played it, you don't yet have that trust in the game system of like, hey, I could lose everything one turn and be competitive the next, you
yep,
know?
yep.
Like that's just the way this one goes. But it's really hard to have the trust in it because most designs, that's just not the case. If you get wiped off the board or nearly wiped off the board or set really far back compared to other players, you go, well, I guess I'm here for another 2 hours and I don't get to win.
Yeah, like
And
if
in
this
dominant species, that's just not the case at all. Like you can win. You can come back.
yeah, if you like came to this game from like Root or something, like a less robust design, I guess I would describe it as, in terms of like your ability to like come back. Um, you might think like the first time you get glaciated and lose a bunch of guys, like I was like, oh shit, like the game's over for me. But like everybody's gonna get glaciated. It doesn't matter. And it's just part of the game. And I do think that's like it's kind of part of the fun of this game even. It's kind of like we're all just like it's almost like more offensive if like somebody throws a pie at you and like there's no big pie fight going on. But
Mm.
we're in the damn bakery. Like we're surrounded by pie ammo and like we're just pieing each other for like 2.5 hours in this game. And it's
It's a
like,
pie fest.
yeah, it's just like that's just the way it is. Like you have to understand that you're here for the pie fight. Like that's what we're here for. But if you've never had pie thrown at you before, then you're gonna have a really rough first time. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. That's I love that. That's a great analogy. But let me ask you guys this. Um, well, I got two things. Let's start with the first one. I think this one's a little bit quicker to talk about. Just talking about the design of this game, like graphically, graphic design of this game, the look of it, maybe even the table presence. This this is not a super built out, you know, pretty game. It's pretty enough. Don't get me wrong. But this is not an overproduced game, right? It's an underproduced game, I would say.
Yeah, you've got cubes, you've got cones. Um, like it's not much to look at. The box art's not like great. It reminds me of something like a dinosaur book from the 90s or something, like a kid's book like with some dinosaurs in it, you know?
Right.
There's something in there. Like, I don't know, the illustrations are a little jank. Um,
They are a little jank. It's a GMT game. I think a lot of their
It
stuff
goes
is
it
that
goes with the
way.
territory. Interestingly, the edition of this game that I have is actually the like visually updated edition.
Oh,
So
really?
I don't know if you guys have actually played the like older version of the
I need
game,
to look this up.
which is like actually even
Even homelier?
homelier. That's a good that yeah, we'll go with that. But
Oh
the version of
man.
the game that we play that like I own, I think it's the third edition on, I could be wrong, where like the environmental like hexes you're putting down do have like a graphic of like the jungle and the mountains and the desert
Oh, they don't normally.
and like in the
Oh.
old version of the game, like maybe the first or second edition, it's just literally like it's a blue tile, so it's the sea tile like level.
I almost don't hate it though. Like,
I mean, in this game, it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
it gets the point across. But I was just saying, like, actually, we're playing the like the higher
the
produced version of the game.
deluxified, yeah.
Yeah, we're playing the higher produced version of the game.
I just
Uh,
found the player boards for the older version, and my oh my, they're in like black and white.
yeah,
Huh.
it's pretty funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's great.
The old
I
the
had
old
no
art on
idea.
the old art on the domination cards also used to be significantly more primitive. Like I think in this edition of the game, it looks like kind of like pictures from a nature documentary or like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But like
It's kind of
the old stuff does not look like that.
I'm looking at the old production and it's kind of hilarious because it looks like it's a game that like would be appealing to like third graders. You know, like in
Well,
terms of like the graphic
that's
design.
what's so funny, but like a third grader like, would
Yeah,
not
it's like
would not play this game.
Third grader about to have a bad day, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say
So so that's great.
little Timmy is about to be taken to the back of the gym and forced to play dominant species.
I'd have
it,
been all over this game when I was in third grade. I grew up on walking with dinosaurs and walking with monsters. I love that crap.
Yeah.
But I I actually I probably would have been like, what is going on?
at some point you kind of just, say screw the rules. I don't get it. Like if you're that young, I don't know. But
Oh
it's a
yeah.
learnable game, and once you do, it's a whole hell of a lot of fun. But my second question for you guys, I don't know if that one was much of a question, more just like we should put it out there that it's not
Yeah.
the prettiest game. But question for you, what do you think the best player count is for this?
Well, six seems good. Like I think it like six feels all right. Like three or less. I don't know why. I don't know how you'd play this at two and have it feel very good. I think
Yeah,
two would be a little weird.
I think
Yeah,
minimum three. I'm gonna say 4 to 5. Six. So I will say that it's important when you play this game, and I would recommend this for anybody who has either not played this way or is thinking of purchasing the game. But I'd say pretty much always you want to play I'm not sure what it's called in the rule book. It might be like the quick game, but it's the version of the game where you remove a few of the domination cards that add action pawns.
mm,
And I think the removal of those cards, plus the removal of the additional kind of time spent on those action pawns, probably cuts the game time by like 40 minutes. Because the removing a round from the end of the game is a lot more meaningful than the beginning of the game because the board stick gets progressively more and more complicated. And so I think that basically cuts a round off the game in total. And I think it leaves the game in like a nice sweet spot playing time. But that also, I think I bring that up because I think also maybe 6 players it probably drags a little bit. I think
mm,
4 or 5 is where you want to be at this one. I think we have played 6 player before, and I thought that for a 6 player game, it did not drag as much as like some games would when you have 6 players, and I think that's because of the system. Um, but I still think 4 or 5 is probably better because I think another thing is when you're at 6 player count you start to lose some measure of control. Like there's just so much on the board at
right.
that point where like you're losing agency with each additional player in the game. And I think like 4 or 5 is probably that sweet spot where like there's enough chaos, but there's also enough agency, and maybe 6 is like a tipping point.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with like, getting getting your adaptation is so important. And in a four-player game, you know, everybody goes around like three people are going to get to adapt most of the time. Sometimes someone will get to adapt twice, but usually three people are going to get to adapt. In the six-player game, sure, everybody has less action pawns, but if you're later in that queue, you might not get to adapt or, you know, what have you. I mean, I think that the game can be a little bit more interesting when that first round of action pawn play, it's like we really, especially early on in the game, you really want to adapt. But having to make the decision between like, oh well, I want first choice at the domination card, or I want first choice at Wonderlust, this or that. Um, because there's some randomness in what choices will even be available to you. Oftentimes, it'll be extremely important that everybody really wants to do Wonderlust because the ocean tile's there, or everybody really wants to do Domination because the eruption card or whatever it's called, the catastrophe
Is
card
it
or whatever it's called.
Cataclysm or is it Catastrophe? Yeah, I don't remember, but
I think it is Cataclysm, yeah,
yeah.
but that might be there, and it's like, oh well, I really want to be the first one in Domination. Um,
No, you're right. It's Catastrophe. I have it pulled up.
okay, there you
Yeah.
go. But regardless, the game will sort of push you towards, okay, there's a really important decision here. And I just feel like at six, you're gonna get taken out of that decision space too often. And I feel like four is the sweet spot. I don't think that the game really solves that issue by reducing the number of action pawns you have at higher player count.
Yep.
With that being said, I was surprised when looking up kind of dominant species versus dominant species marine before this that a lot of people were saying, well, if you want to play this at 5 or 6, get dominant species. If you want to play this at 2, 3, or 4, get marine. To me, this game is great at 4 dominant species. I don't see any reason not to play this at 4. We'll talk about marine, of course. The comments did make me interested in busting out marine maybe at 3 with just us guys, because I feel like we've sort of had this one on hold because we haven't been able to get a 4 player game. I'd be interested to try marine again at 3 and see how it feels.
Yeah, I'm down.
Um, but I don't think there's any reason not to play this game at 4 or to play marine over it at 4 for that matter.
I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think about this game compared to El Grande? Because the last game that I played was the first time that I had played Dominant Species after having played El Grande.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I was noticing some similarities. Obviously, like El Grande is the like granddad of this like the area majority kind of genre. So there's going to be some similarities naturally. But I do think that there are quite a few that are there that are present. Like,
Certainly, dominant species is more influenced by kind of that era of area control, like an earlier era, than of the what at the time in the 2010s was the kind of current FFG, more plastic, more dice rolling type area control. So I can see where you're coming from there, because I think dominant species is definitely like it skipped over like the whole uh plastic and dice area control stuff, basically. Um, I mean, it is quite Euro-ish, really, dominant species. Like, there aren't random elements besides which exploration tiles come out, which wanderlust tiles, I mean, and which domination cards come out. Like, but there's no like resolution that's random in this game whatsoever, I think, unless I'm forgetting something.
no, I mean it's like it's all pretty clear information. The dominance cards do remind me of the cards that you can bid on in El Grande because they had
Yeah,
some of those had a similar like I think in El Grande they're like a little more toned down. Like everything's a little bit more dialed up in dominant species.
Yeah.
but to be fair, in El Grande, like how you bid can really, really depend on which cards are out there. And that does give a similar feel to where the hell am I gonna put my first pawn down in dominant species?
Well,
That little bit of the game does have some resemblance, and that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about it before. Um, and what one thing I had intended on bringing up earlier in regards to the look of this game and the simplicity of the production was that I don't think I mentioned I really don't mind that. And in the same way as, with El Grande, even this newer version of El Grande that Will picked up, they've kept the actual production very simple. And more as I play games like this, I go, I mean, what are we doing all this other crap for? I'm here to play the game. I'm here for the
yeah.
mechanics. Let's not let everything else get in the way. And El Grande and Dominant Species both do a very good job of that in particular and are very great examples of why you just don't need all this other crap. It can be fun, but you don't need it.
Non sequitur, but I have to bring this up while it's still fresh in my mind because I remembered. But somebody described the initial bidding round in El Grande for those cards as trick taking
Really.
in some thread, and I was thinking like, no.
Yeah, how that person if they ever need like a new like lobotomy patient, that guy should volunteer.
I think it
Like
was
if they
like
need to study lobotomies.
maybe it was in an ARCs thread. I think somebody was saying like, I don't like these new area control games. I just play El Grande. And like it wasn't me or one of my 500 sock puppet accounts that shill old games, but it was just some guy. And someone was like, well, you should like ARCs if you like El Grande because El Grande is just a trick-taking game as well. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, that's crazy.
I was like, that's great. Well, it's not even a trick. It's not a trick, first of all, because
There's
like
no trick turning in El Grande.
there's no trick turning, but the thing is like there you don't want to win the trick in El Grande like a lot of the time. You're like, oh, like they played that card, so I'll just go low and like, get this benefit
Right.
for losing the trick. Like, what? It's not, I mean,
Yeah, there's like a lot of strategy on do I want to win it? Do I not want to win it? Do I want to end up in the middle? That sort of thing. Yeah, that's not that doesn't make any
it's
sense.
more like
Right.
bidding, I think. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. And yeah,
How strange. How strange.
the trick-taking community, as usual, a blight upon the earth.
I gotta
I'm
I
just kidding.
gotta agree, man. These trick turners, man, like get your face out of my game shops, you know? I don't want to see you. You're throwing your money around influencing the market. And let me tell you, I think that your money's dirty, you know? I think that you ought to put it back in your pocket, go over to Subway and order a meatball marinara footlong and throw it in your backpack and eat it like 4 hours later without reheating it because you're gross, you know? Like you're gross. So I'm not
Okay.
interested in you and your kind is I guess what I'm getting at, you know?
Yeah, Blake, the gatekeeper of the board game
I
community.
was gonna say yeah, it's my fault. I provoked the Blake rant this episode.
The reality is like you get me in front of a trick turner and I'll tell them, you know, to each their own, you know. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, knock your fantasy, you know, like you can do whatever you want.
Mm.
Um, but it is pretty fun to insult people.
That's the moral of the story. So dominant species marine, as Ben mentioned earlier, is the one game we can definitely say for sure is derivative of dominant species. Same designer, same publisher. Um, 11 years later, though,
Really? When did it come out?
2021.
Really? I didn't realize that was like a newer game.
It is. Yeah.
Mhm. Did you
It
think it
they
was
they
older?
preserved some of the same visual style, you
That's
know?
one way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah. It
That's
looks
very
like a game
true.
out of time. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't change anything about the cubage. The tiles are looking the same. They got the same little cylinders. No cones though, man. They
No
they
cones?
decided the cones were out.
If it ain't,
What did we do instead of cones?
Nothing.
there was,
Really?
gosh, yeah, no cones. In fact, the game is listed as being zero point 0.3 lower weight. Dominant species 4.04, marine is 3.7.
The point three is just the cones.
I
The
think
point
so.
0.3, but instead of the cones, there were the cylinders, the special action cylinders of each element, remember?
Hmm.
I guess those are sort of
I mean, that's like that
cone,
adjacent, that's kind of the mechanic that replaces it, like in the design, is
right.
those sort of. But yeah, I mean, it's there are people that are like, oh, I love marine but hate dominant species, or like I love dominant species but hate marine, and I'm like, I feel like if you like one of these games, you probably like the other one, right? It's just
Yeah.
they're not
Ben and
that
I were talking
Right.
different.
about that before we started recording, and it's like, yeah, they feel very, very similar. Despite there being a whole laundry list of differences here. But yeah, like in terms of the actual stuff you get out of the game, very comparable.
I think the single most impactful change is the instead of there being a discrete phase devoted entirely to all players putting their action pawns down and programming their actions for the kind of action resolution round that will come afterwards. Instead, people just kind of it's more traditional actually, like a more traditional worker placement-y way. They just do something when they put the pawn there, basically. So that might be why this appeals more to some people. Like if you don't like action programming and that's like a make or break thing, like you just really don't like it, then yeah, this is the version of the game for you. But in my case, like I like it both ways. It's not significant to me. I probably have a little bit of preference for the original dominant species because I think that the it's a little juicier to have that phase be separate and to like have all that planning and like
Yeah.
clashing of plans show up. But I think that Marine certainly has some interesting new stuff that it does that's good. It kind of I guess if I describe it in one phrase, I'd say it kind of flips dominant species on its head in a lot of ways. Like the valuable regions are flipped from the original dominant species, and that the ones that are like worth more points are easier to be in or something like that. Do you guys remember that situation?
Um,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It's been a little while.
it
I
has
know that
been.
you build the map differently, like the glaciate happens from the edges of the board rather than the center of the board.
Yes, that's another
Like,
thing.
there's like a lot of stuff that's just like kind of topsy-turvy. You get benefits for like making the board look nice. I remember like you get a benefit for putting tiles next to other tiles that are the same. So you kind of want to put like all of the like deep ocean together, put the land next to the land, you know.
There's one other thing that not to rag on it, but there's one other thing that I'm not as big a fan of, which is that in this game the factions or the species are not asymmetric inherently. You like create the asymmetry from kind of a mini draft.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
normally I like drafting stuff, but I kind of just like in the original game that like each of these factions has like personality baked in. I think for this kind of game, I don't love drafting the asymmetry at the very beginning. I prefer to
Yeah.
kind of have that thing as an emergent thing like during the gameplay because I always feel like when you have that kind of system, excuse me,
Bless you.
excuse me. When you have that kind of system, I always feel like people are like well, I guess the thing that I'm always worried about is the more traits you have in that pool, in that draft, some people are just going to have a better draft than others, you know?
Yeah. And that's where I was going to go with it. With the original dominant species, the factions feel very, very balanced. And why are we mixing this up? I guess part of it is probably that we only have up to 4 players in dominant species marine, which is quite a big difference.
Yep.
Um, Maybe we just felt like, oh, with when you have 6, you got enough variety. Even if you're only playing 4, there's a little bit more choice in terms of what you're going to start with. With only having 4, well, we don't want to just only have 4, you know, variable
Yeah.
starts. So let's have this whole draft. But why mess with a good thing? When you've got the balance there like that, why mess with it? And I don't think we've had any plays where, it ends up mattering in such a big way, but it does feel like I just don't quite understand why. And that's even with, the knowledge that some of these are very familiar. For example, you might draft where you get a additional, starting adaptation, and that would
Hmm.
be comparable to the reptiles from the previous game. Um, and I mean like a starting adaptation that can't be removed in the same way that the reptiles can have their pre-printed one. But yeah, I don't know. That doesn't quite do it for me in this one either.
But that
Yeah.
said, I do think the replacement of domination, which is as we mentioned, the like special there's like basically one elemental cylinder for each element. And in dominant species, I think maybe the heaviest part of the game, the part of the game that kind of especially with new players gives them the most trouble is just tracking dominance in each individual tile because you have to. Like it's really important to track this value. We played with an older gentleman one time who really wanted us to track it with like a D10 or something. It's like
Hmm.
where are the D10s with your copy of the game? It's like we just do it in our heads. It's like no,
Right.
you gotta put D10s on the board. It's like so some people are probably homebrewing ways to track it more easily. Certainly he was, and I think that this mechanical change is kind of to reduce that overhead, which is that You're just tracking how dominant you are of an element like over all spaces. So if you're like the photosynthetic people that have a bunch of sun element, you're going to get the sun action pawn, and that's like your special thing. And in order for somebody to take that from you, they have to be like more dominant overall, not just in one specific tile when they perform the dominate action. It makes it easier to track, and it also opens up some interesting strategies. I think the most memorable play we had of this game was Ben coming out of nowhere, being so photosynthetic, he became Kryptonian and like became some sort of super algae.
Yeah, I think it might have been snails actually
It
that I
was the
was dominant.
photosynthetic sit snails. Yeah.
I don't know.
It was like stacking like so many sun disks that it like because they had like a multiplicative effect on VP with something
Yeah.
else that was going on. Yeah.
I think he scored
Yeah.
57 points in one action.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool, and that was something that like I wasn't really thinking about doing that. And so the fact that this system allows for some creative plays like that was really I was impressed. I thought it was cool.
I know one of the guys we were playing with there turned to me and said, "You taught me something about this game."
Oh
Oh
man.
my gosh.
Yeah, that was it was a memorable play. I remember I got freaking solar beamed or whatever the like the cataclysm card. I think Blake did it. I think Blake had some sort of combo as Blake always does. He had some sort of card combo where he like drew a card, then played a card, which then play another card, and it was like, what? This isn't that kind of game, but it happened anyway, and I got like solar beamed and lost everything, and I was like, oh my God. Because I think the what I it's not solar beam. Is it a gosh, what is it?
It's similar. It's something around there.
Solar beam is like a Pokemon move or something. It's like not solar eclipse. What is that? What is that thing called? I can't remember the name of that card. Like solar flare? It's got to be I
It
think
might be
it's
solar flare,
might be
yeah.
solar flare. But yeah, I got solar flared and it was just the end of me. And even though we said earlier in this episode that like that most of the time you can recover from like bad stuff happening, I remember this was like it was like a solar flare and I just happened to be perfectly situated to just receive the full brunt of a fully operational battle station, and like that was just it. It was like, oh
Was it
God.
solar radiation?
Yeah,
It
I'm
that might
might
trying
have
have
to
been
been
remember.
that,
it
yeah.
might have been that. Yeah, it was gosh. I mean, I still remember it. That was like a year, 2 years ago when that thing happened, and I still it still hurts. I
It
I
haunts
As
you.
the
I
flashbacks.
Does
I
it
bear
upset
this.
you that I genuinely don't remember? Like this was just another day for me.
I
It
just
was the
remember
most.
it was like the biggest blowout turn I've ever seen, like in Dominant Species or in Marine, where it was just like, oh no, like this time truly I can't financially recover from this. Because they're all killed too, like, and I like didn't have enough cubes to get back on the board, and it was like, oh God.
Right.
I guess that's another thing, though. I think the balance of the domination cards in the original dominant species is a little bit better. When you remove the, like we said in the quick game, you remove the action pawn gains, those domination cards, because I think those are a little swingy. I don't like them so much. And that's like that's an official variant that the developer has provided you. So it's not a house rule. It's just like another way of playing the game that I think is better. I do think that the domination cards in Marine seem to be like a little wilder. And I
Right.
think we were at a sufficient level of wildness in the original dominant species.
That's true. It's already quite enough in terms of wildness, as you've put it.
Yeah. But ultimately, it may sound like I'm ragging on this game, but at the end of the day, this is still an outstanding design. And like I said, I think what makes you want to play one game or the other is kind of just how you feel about the worker placement. Like, do you want to do the action programming, or do you just want to place worker and get something right now? And in a way, I guess it makes sense that this is a later design because this actually is an example of one of the continuous turn structures. Like maybe this probably is kind of feels a little bit more like Dwellings of Eldervale. You got like a recall turn, um, like that game,
Right.
and it's not like a everyone recalls turn. So you're kind of choosing when you recall to be able to redeploy in different at different stages and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I remember there was like another change they made with the exploration where like like it was like they changed like you have to order the like tiles that come out in a specific way. And I'm trying to remember. Like I think we just put them out randomly, but it's like like something happens with them. It's been a while. I'm like trying to remember.
Oh my gosh. I just found the these like custom meeples that people have for the
Of
game.
like
Look at
the
this.
of like the snails and crustaceans. Oh my God. Well, those look so good.
Yeah,
This
isn't
would
that
this would
cool?
this would be the Kickstarter version of
Yeah.
Dominant Species Marine.
Yeah,
For
I'm
those at
into
home,
that.
it's like there's some like lobster meeples and shark meeples and stuff, and there's like little versions of them. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like in a perfect world, that would be kind of like the level of production that would be optimal for this game. Because like I don't think this game, either of these games would benefit from like plastic or like,
No.
or 3D structures or whatever. But I wouldn't say no to some, little spider meeples. And
Yeah.
hey, that
Yeah.
would be another advantage for the spider faction because then you got arachnophobia as well. Like
Right.
people don't want to come
Yes.
into your zone, They got a little
Yeah,
spider
some
people there.
people are not going to want to touch your spiders. That's
Okay.
very true.
What is the thing on the left, the purple one? Because the meeple kind of looks like a rat to me. I'm forgetting what the
It's a little phallic too, that, you know.
Well, you
Is
see what
that
you
the
want to
sea
see.
cucumber faction?
No,
Like what's going on?
it's the reptiles, isn't it?
is it the reptiles? Yeah,
That's yeah,
okay.
it's reptiles.
I think it
Huh.
might be the sea cucumbers. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's got
Speaking of real life evolution history, there was a period before the Cambrian explosion where it was just a bunch of worms. That was really when sea cucumbers had their day.
Were they like dominating the worms, the sea cucumbers?
No, I mean like the sea cucumber is like a worm, right?
Holy moly, really? I
Are
had
they
no idea.
worms? I don't know what a sea cucumber is. I
I don't
think
know.
they're a kind
I
of
don't know
worm.
what a worm is.
Worm is actually more of just like a way of being than like a taxonomical thing. There's like we're related to some things you'd consider a worm much more closely than like some other things, you
I don't
know?
know. This sounds a lot like the Croconoles and area control game conversation, and I'm not ready for it.
You're not, you still don't buy the crokinole as area control, huh?
I'll be a
Well,
worm
I'm willing to
before
say
I
that
admit that.
dominant species marine is more area control than crokinole. I mean,
That's fair.
that I
Yeah.
can say.
Yep.
That much is sure. But I should add this. I think an important thing to mention, and I think we have all kind of touched on this game. Marine is very, very, very good. Um, Will hinted at, I'll hint at that I do like Dominant Species, the original, better. I'm not sure where Ben falls on that. But let me just put it out there. I think it's easier to get a copy of Marine. It's still that GMT, they need to wait until there's 500 people that are trying to order it or whatever, but that's not
Yep.
really happening with the original Dominant Species anymore. And it might still be with Marine. It certainly was 2 years ago when I think I got my copy.
I think we're in a period of them both being available, but I
Oh, really?
agree, but I agree that the availability of GMT games can be extremely spotty. And like I might say this now, and maybe somebody watches this video next week and it's not on
Right,
Amazon anymore, Like you just don't
right.
know with GMT.
But I don't think you can go wrong with either one. Like I said before, I think that us three trying out Marine at 3 player and seeing if it feels decent, is a fun idea because people are raving about like, okay, well, it's better at 3 than the OG is. So it could be a fun way to get our fix. But yeah,
Yeah, I'd be down. I want to give it another go. Become the Lord of Snails or, what have you.
The phallic reptiles.
right.
Yeah.
See, they should open an Etsy shop and do like the dominant species meeple orders and stuff. Like the
Yeah,
people do,
that'd be pretty cool. There might even be one. Who knows?
I'll look after this episode. But anyway, Unless you guys have anything else, should we go to scoring?
Sure.
I'm down. What do you want to do? Are we scoring both of them?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to just score both of them. You guys want to do it that way?
Sure.
Yeah. Who would like to start?
I can start if you guys want me
Sure.
to.
Do it, Will.
I've got mine locked in.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
won't be affecting my score
Okay, yeah, yeah.
now.
Well,
I have my scores locked
yeah,
in my
lock it,
brain.
lock everything in. I think
I'm locked.
I'm gonna give the original dominant species a 9.5. Um, as it's been clear throughout the episode, I am incredibly impressed by this design, and I think especially as someone who's interested in and does a little bit of game design, this design feels almost insurmountable. Like it's almost like it's easier design. Well, okay, easier is kind of a weird word to use, but it's easier to at least kind of get the ball rolling on a lighter game. Obviously, it's hard to make a really, really great, like Reiner Knizia level good light game. But to make like a really good heavy game, it feels like there's so many things you need to add, and you always run the risk of there being like a mechanic too far, or the players hate this part of the game, and now you got to get rid of it, and there's all these issues that arise, and this feels like a heavy game where like every piece of it is essential and interlocks and is synergistic with the rest of the game's design, and it's been clearly play tested to death. Like it's just super solid. And I personally like the action programming aspect of it. I think it makes the game very tense in a fun way. And those are all things that are, big pluses to me. As for Marine, I think I'm going to give it uh, I need to play Marine more. It's tough. I think I'm going to give it a 9. I just don't think it's as good as like the original, but it's still getting a 9 from me, which is really high praise. I mean, if you've watched this channel at all, we don't really give 9 and ups that often. I guess we recently gave Lord of the Rings Duel a 9, but that was kind of like 9 in its class, right? And 9 for like a mid to heavyweight game is pretty high praise. I think that if dominant species didn't exist, Marine might get a 9.5 from me, but it's like the lurking specter of its father or older brother
Right.
that prevents me from giving it higher because I think like I just think about the original sometimes when I play Marine. And again, I just prefer the uh, action pawn system of the original and some other things. Anyway, that's me.
All right. I've got my mine locked in. I'm gonna say 8.3 for both. I like both of them well enough, and I think they're different enough. If dominant species marine is pretty good at 3, it will definitely earn that justification, at least for our gaming group, because we'll actually be able to play the thing. Um, like if we can actually bust it out and it feels pretty good at 3, then I'm gonna feel better and better about that, like rating them equally. But I think they're different enough that it wouldn't be bad to have both. Like n neither of them make each other obsolete. Like I think that I'd be happy to play either at any given day. Like if you told me we were gonna bust out one of them, I don't think it'd be kind of a coin flip for me. Um, Again, I think they provide a pretty similar experience, just like a little bit different. I think maybe my enjoyment of Marine might have been a little bit hampered by like just going like the amount of times that you're thinking like, oh well, it's just like in dominant species, right? And it's like, no, it's a little bit different.
Right.
um you
Even like the
know
Wonderlust scoring is like, you count the tile that you're placing as well as stuff like that.
yeah, it's like
Um,
there's some stuff that it's like it's a nuance where you're like you have to gear shift, I think, a little bit. But I mean, I like them both a lot. They are pretty heavy games. My brain does start going up on like dial-up mode sometimes when we're playing either of them. I do have to just kind of go, um, like this is a good enough play. Like I think if you get a little too into the weeds, you can be like, what is the like best thing for me to do? And you just
right.
kind of have to go with either of them. Like. this is fine. We're good. Like I did something, you know? I don't
Yeah.
know. Um, I like a game with some more diplomacy, and I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge disrespecter of randomness. I embrace the random elements of a lot of games, and I like some random elements. But it's a fun puzzle to figure out for either of them. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I I land at a 9.5 on dominant species, and for now, I'm going to give an 8.5 to Marine. Part of me does want to give it a 9, but
I think well, sorry to interrupt, but I was also going to give it an 8.5, but I'm kind of like I'm giving it a little bit of benefit of the doubt just
right.
because we played it less. And Ben also said there is that kind of like gear shift
Yes.
disruption. So I'm giving it a little bit of like a,
I think it rings true though of like, it's Freud said that for a boy to become a man, his father must die first, right? Like until then, he's living in his shadow. And Carl Jung came in and disagreed and said, well, yes, but the death can be symbolic. And I think part of the problem here is that it doesn't matter because there's never going to be a symbolic death of dominant species. It's timeless, you know? And also you can't kill it because it's not living.
it's
And
ironic that you bring
so,
that up because the designer died, Chad Jensen. Like he died young. I think it was like in his 50s or early 60s. And so like not only that, but like we're never getting like a dominant species like two.
Sky,
Yeah, like yeah, we're not getting like
Ariel,
yeah, Ariel. We're not getting like there's not
Dominant species alien
yeah,
world.
we're not getting like
right?
a dominant
Yeah.
species cinematic universe like with Wingspan or everything.
Right. But my point being, like, I think there will always be that comparison point. Um, it's sort of like with Andromeda's Edge and Dwellings, where it's like
Mm.
there's always going to be that comparison point of like, does Andromeda's Edge live up to Dwellings? Does dominant species Marine live up to dominant species? And like I said, I'm excited to try this out more at 3 and see if maybe it is improving on Marine in that regard, because it very well could be. It seemed like a lot of people online were saying that, and I'm willing to at least give that a shot. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, what a great game, both of them. But more experience with the original, and one of the games that really, really made me start to become a believer in area control games, especially heavier area control games. I'd always been an Inish fan as long as I've been playing, hobby board games, but um, kind of one of those where you go, okay, there's something more to this as like a genre. There's something more to this as like, you know, a topic of discussion, a reason to gather, you know. And that's pretty special that dominant species can do that. So if you haven't given it a shot, I really hope you do.
And it's interesting because our first play of this game was so hampered by the teach and we still came back around to it.
Yeah, I remember thinking it was cool and just being like, I didn't really like that guy. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I recall like complaining quite heavily to both of you about him being like a total jackwagon.
Yeah, he deliberately left important rules and like interactions out of his explanation of the game to benefit himself. He was one of the people who like he's teaching the game, but like he's teaching you enough so that you can play, but not enough that so that he can't win. But then I think he
Right.
didn't win. Like, there
Like,
was
yeah, I think that actually Ben won. I think that
I
you
think
squeaked out a win,
Ben
if
might
I
Did I?
remember
I
correctly.
don't remember who won that first game, but I don't think he did. I remember he was playing birds, but I
I don't
think
know if I was even playing that game.
wait,
Oh, were you
what?
not?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Well,
I
but
remember
I
just
agreed. It
hearing
it
about
looked
this
like
guy
this
being
guy
a
was going to
jaguar.
win, and then he did not. And
Yeah.
you start to ask, well, how do you know he's deliberately withholding information? This guy had quite the attitude of like, you know, like kind of feeling superior about his plays and getting all excited about the in-game scoring and stuff. And it was like, man, you didn't tell us about any of this. Like, there's no glory in your victory. Why are you acting like there is, you know?
Yeah. Then this is a game where it's going to take you a full play to really understand it. Like, I mean, like a full, like, beginning to end play of the game. And then after that, you'll be like, oh, okay. And then in your next play, you'll be able to like approach it fresh and understand scoring and everything. But it's just a little too much to digest in the like teach, I think, which is fine. It's fine because I think it's worth learning this game and like this is one where I do say this a lot for the heavy games that we like, but I think more than any other game in the kind of heavy category, this is a game that once you learn it, it'll just like flow way more easily. Like it'll, and I think that comes back to this action programming thing, which is just it makes the game run itself really efficiently. And I think we brought it up in the Uprising episode, but just having the sort of sideboard that has all the actions there and
Yeah.
lets you sort of plan the game and then the game kind of just like tells you how it's going to go. That's another reason I think this design is so like elegant is because it's like imagine this game where you don't have that part of the board. It could really get a lot more complicated really quick. Mm.
Yeah. I think that's so true.
In other news, we died in Kingdom Death Monster.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the update
Story
on that,
update.
yeah.
We died.
Sorry, update, we got freaking destroyed.
Apparently fighting the Kingsman early without knowing his skill set in advance and so not like properly preparing is not a good idea. Um
It was depressing too. It was really depressing because it was like it just got, it started off really badly and then it just got worse. And there was just this sinking feeling that was like, oh, this is it. Like it wasn't abrupt, but I mean, like it wasn't abrupt. It was just like these little misfortunes kept piling up and it was like, it got worse and
Yeah.
worse and worse.
yeah,
Well,
like
it
we
was
would have
like,
had it to get lucky to be able to kill him and we got unlucky.
Yeah, we
yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like we couldn't roll for crap, and he was like rolling like nothing less than a like six. You
Hmm.
know, it was like, oh, okay. Like it's like, oh, we have one evasion. We forgot that everybody gets one evasion because we went for that thing, and it was like, no, it doesn't matter. He's never gonna roll below a three. Like
Oh
a three
man.
or less.
Yeah, that was rough. That was rough.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, I got 3 hits on him, but no one else did, so it doesn't matter. He's just gonna
Right.
put his cards back at the top. What a
And it
jerk.
was like, oh, maybe we can unlock his secret fighting art, except he just hamstrung somebody, so now they can't use fighting arts at all.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
after a certain point in the fight, literally nobody could use fighting arts because everyone had received like a wound that prevented them from being able to. So at that point, it was truly hopeless. But anyway, hopefully, we played the Mistborn deck building game, and we played Samurai recently as well a few times, and we're gonna get in a few more plays of those, and that'll be the review for next time, I think. But
Yeah,
I'm excited.
one game that you can get pretty easily, and one game that will be impossible for you to acquire.
Yeah. Yeah. Samurai is even harder to acquire. Well, we'll talk about it in like the episode, but sheesh. Yeah, that was a long search. But anyway, as for Dominant Species, I'm happy we were finally had the opportunity to talk about this because this is a game that we've been talking about like but making an episode about forever. Like it's a game that we had played even before we started the podcast, and we just never had an episode for it. So I'm happy
Yeah.
we finally were able to talk about it a bit.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well,
Should I do the Nixon sign off?
yeah, yeah,
I
dude.
am not a crook.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks
Uh,
for watching and or listening, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
see you guys.